Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, June 2nd, 2021. Apparently, June goes on a little longer than I thought. I was like, again, with the June. We did this yesterday, but apparently it goes on for 30 days. So here we go. This is the second of 30. We won't do shows for all of them, of course. But, I don't know. Somehow this caught me by surprise. I just figured we'd be moving on to July at some point soon. I don't know, the kids in the neighborhood have fireworks already, so I guess I'm ready for July 4th. But anyway, exciting June to come, I suppose. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. Bill tells us all the way from Portland, Maine, where it is still June there as well. Nothing changes the further north you go. It's still the same date. You have to go east-west to affect that. Kagro X, me, David Waldman, what's on tap for today, reminds you that tonight is the last quarter of the moon. Ah, well. I should have seen that on my calendar. My calendar doesn't actually have that, but it would be nice. We hope you enjoy it because it's never coming back. Okay, the last quarter. This is it. Your last chance to enjoy the last quarter of the moon. You shouldn't enjoy it, of course, because I think we're still too close in proximity to Memorial Day, and you'll probably get angry emails and complaints via social media for not being properly mournful, I suppose, if you were celebrating the last quarter of the moon for whatever reason. This moon, too, keeps coming and going. This I'm not sure about. Not sure what the point of all this is. I'll have to speak to the moon people about this and see what we can get together. Greg Dworkin, computer appears to be up and running and working today because the raft O Stories is already making its way downriver. That's good news. I awoke this morning to see, I don't know how it even reached my tweet stream, but I'm noting for the record, just because, I don't know, you keep records of these things, you tell me. A tweet this morning from the account, I should check out this account and see how active it's been, from Liberty Hangout, which, you know, it's not like we ever cited the thing or anything, but we've actually, I think, spoken about it on the show once or twice before. I don't know what to tell you about it. It's a conservative, supposedly a conservative media outlet. It's essentially the operation of, I don't remember her name, but you remember the young woman who graduated from college a couple of years ago, Kent State, as I recall, and she made a big deal, and maybe it was a bigger deal than usual because it was Kent State, and they have a history, you know, with guns on their campus, etc. But she was the pro-gun activist who took a graduation picture holding an AR-15, started a brief craze of conservative women shooting their graduation pictures while holding guns because something, and it was a brief flash in the pan, as was this young woman, and then she decided that she could somehow make a career out of this, and I don't know, I guess she got funded by somebody in the wingnut welfare world. And she then, but she couldn't think of anything else to do. So she kept going back to campus with the gun on and then interviewing students. What do you think about my walking around on campus with a gun? And then she kind of expanded into, what do you think about other conservative things that I like to talk about? But nobody wanted to talk about them because they were college kids and they didn't give a crap about this stuff. So anyway, I guess she decided to make her thing very cool and hip and millennial. And she was going to bring the ideology of libertarianism, which was very hot, I guess, for them at the time, to the college campus. So in order to appeal to cool college kids who just want to, you know, hang out, she decided to name her Operation Liberty Hangout. And wow, it's great to hang out with them. Anyway, this morning we're hanging out with them because, this was actually tweeted last night. I guess 7:45 p.m. on June 1st. I guess this is what was on their mind. Just so you know, because it's educational message as well. They wanted to share with everyone that an orgasm lasts for only a few seconds. And this is a morning show, I know, and maybe you just spat out your breakfast tea or whatever, but look, it's just a bodily function. Let's not get too excited about it. It lasts for only a few seconds anyway. However, you should note, by way of comparison, this is all my own connective tissue here. An orgasm lasts for only a few seconds. The fires of hell, however, last forever. Okay. And it's not worth throwing away the eternal gift of heaven for an immediate sexual gratification. Respect your body. God gave it to you as a temple. Choose the cross, capital C cross, by the way, over lust and pride. What a message for today's graduating seniors, millennials, college kids, etc. College kids, I guess we're sort of moving into the Zoomer generation and out of millennial time. But boy, don't you want to hang out with those very libertarian people. I didn't realize this was part of the libertarian philosophy. But I don't know. I guess it is. Anyway, Liberty Hangout, their website, has been, I think, by my viewing of it, inactive since about September, October of 2020, as the young woman who runs the place, I guess, like I said, ran out of ideas besides going to Kent State campus with her gun on to ask questions about guns and whether or not they hated gay people enough. But the Twitter account seems active. Anyway, I'm just surprised that they sort of faded from view. They were the hottest thing since the Can Kicks Back, that awesome millennial-focused campus project to raise awareness and excitement around the burgeoning federal debt. Do you remember that even existed? I don't know what to tell you about that. But I guess the Twitter account is easier to operate, so they just continued with that one. All right. Well, it's of no use to anyone to know what they're up to. I just thought that was interesting. I'm reviewing the news, looking for something important, and all of a sudden pops up this sort of blast from the past, and here's what they're up to, just sort of letting everybody do their own thing because of how libertarian they are, except let's all just not ever allow anybody to have any sex because, God is watching. I just thought that was an interesting morning message. And even though they wrote it in the evening. But you got to be aware of what your audience is and who's going to tune in when. Like right now, for instance. That's why we bring you Greg Dworkin to bring you
for
much more
stimulating
exciting
discussion.
Yeah, right. Much better than that one, which is to say,
that kind of stimulating discussion.
Well, they don't want you to have that kind either, right?
Yeah.
So
and don't even get any ideas. Bad things happen on Zoom to people.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's true, right? And once you add video, you're really in trouble. By the way, just for the sake of further, I don't know what, shaking our head at Liberty Hangout. Their tweet of 12 hours ago is a picture of Ron DeSantis on which they photoshopped it, or maybe it's an illustration, and he's wearing this enormous, like, European monarch style gold crown covered in jewels, etc. And it is celebrating his targeting of transgender kids in the latest bill signing. But the message from Liberty Hangout, which, again, remember that liberty means you're not allowed to do anything, and I am, just says, what an absolute king, which is really, a lot of tweets went out that way. That the first three words were the same, what an absolute, but then they used a different word for king in most people's tweets. All right. Anyway.
Well, this is
that's where they are,
a broad problem, not a narrow problem. And first, let's go back in time. This is something
Please.
Jeff Jarvis found.
Let's start over entirely.
Which I thought was funny. He tweeted, "Ought young girls read the internet?"
Oh.
And it's based on a old newspaper clipping from the Sunday Post Dispatch. Entitled "A Clear-Headed Professor." An article printed in the Sunday Post Dispatch, Professor William T. Harris asks and answers the question, ought young girls to read the daily newspapers?
I see.
He thinks it's the duty of newspapers to print the news, and while that necessarily includes crimes and vices of every conceivable character, the account is also accompanied by the fact of punishment, so that while young girls are being gradually informed of the wickedness of the world, they are also shown the inevitable fate of those who sin.
I see. That's
the
good
wise
news.
parent, says Professor Harris, will accustom his daughters by degrees to the spectacle of the world as it is, and seek most of all to make them strong against temptation and yet without self-righteousness.
Oh,
Why is this of interest? It's semi-amusing, of course. But as we get to the second part of my segment, which will be after the break probably, we'll talk a little bit about QAnon.
Oh.
Its religious motivations, the factions it's split into, and a whole bunch of fascinating things about just yet another different take on the moral majority and white evangelicals pushing their worldview on everybody else.
It's a variant of the same virus.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So I think that's an interesting way to
cool,
start the
and
show
I want to
off.
hang out with it. Yes.
Yeah, but I want to go back to some of the lightning round stuff that we ought to be talking about. For example,
all right. Lightning, please.
final results for the New Mexico special election last night. Melanie Stansbury, Democrat, 60.26%. Mark Moores, Republican, 35.74%.
Recount, please.
Yeah, because it was a close, statistical dead heat.
Forensic
Wolf
audit.
Blitzer would say. Forensic audit. So the Democrat wins by 25 points, which is 2 points more than Biden won it at the presidential level, and 8 points more than Deb Haaland won it at the U.S. House level. A very good showing for the Democrat.
Yes.
And as somebody pointed out, Stansbury. Stansbury sounds like a New England town.
Yeah, right.
Somewhere.
With Angela Lansbury.
Bucolic, idyllic look, but below the surface links all sorts of things.
Okay.
So, it's great,
Mysterious.
and I was excited about it, and I was pleased that Melanie Stansbury did as well as she did. But there's so many ways to look at this. Probably the best one is don't make too much of it because special elections are special. And that's just a warm-up for the absolute pundit crown jewel, which is trying to figure out what the Virginia gubernatorial race means in an off year for the next presidential election.
Okay.
So it's good to keep in practice about your punditry when it really doesn't mean that much. But at the same time, there's a lot of different ways to look at this. Melanie Stansbury won the early vote. The Republicans won the day of the election vote. There was bad weather. Maybe that had something to do with it. Previous data suggests bad weather has little to do with how elections turn out because people want to vote and they vote when they want. But
it's indoors mostly.
If you look at this as a contest between two different worldviews. Okay. Worldview one is that without Trump on the ballot, Democrats won't be motivated. Because motivation to vote Democratic, whether it's the rich suburbs or the poor inner city, or just in general, if you're a human being, is you hate Trump and therefore you're going to come out and vote against him.
Right. Well, I do.
But I will, the other side is, okay, but marginal voters who never vote anyway came out to vote for Trump in 2016 and 2020, but does that mean that they'll come out in the off years, especially now that he's lost?
Yeah.
And so if your view is this was a battle between good and evil, between the side that said without Trump on the ballot, Democrats won't turn out, and without Trump on the ballot, Republicans won't turn out, well, the Democrats won by a lot. So what does that mean? Oh, but, just interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, right. And as you said, caution, special election, Democratic district. But, okay. Yeah. I mean, maybe just, I don't know anything about Mark Moores. Is that how he says it? I don't know.
Moores, I think.
It was like Moores, right?
And I don't know how he pronounces it. We don't need to know. He lost.
Well, yeah, that's true. We never have to learn how to pronounce his name. But yeah, I'm wondering whether, what does he think? Did he ever think he stood a chance? Was he Trumpy? I don't know. Doesn't matter.
No. The thing is, the Democrat was going to win there.
Yeah.
The question is going to be, what's the margin? Okay. 15 points, 12 to 15 points, that's a safe bet, usual. Anything less than that, certainly less than 10, is a danger sign for Democrats. And anything more than 15 should make Democrats happy. It was 25. So that means, therefore, you shouldn't make too much of it.
All right, well,
right. I'm just if it were 15, it would say, it completely, validates my priors, and so it makes me a great analyst, and leave it at that. And nobody was predicting 25, and it was 25, and therefore I don't make too much of it because nobody was predicting 25. That's the proper pundit analysis.
We'll stick with that then. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe later I'll find out if he was a particularly Trumpy guy. It also won't mean very much, but I'm just curious. What are people doing?
Right.
Melanie
Dave
Stansbury.
Wasserman
All right,
has the
welcome,
conventional
Melanie.
wisdom, of course. So he says, look, the Democrats only hope for the midterms. But one I'm not ready to dismiss is that the current GOP coalition is overly reliant on peripherally engaged voters who only bother to show up when Trump's on the ballot.
Okay.
Why does he say only hope for the midterms? It's not that the Republicans are winning on ideas. It's that the technical aspects of redistricting, which is, after all, his moniker. He's redistrict.
That's true. He will be worried about that.
It favors Republicans because they picked up seats in Republican areas like Texas. And so that puts the Democratic majority in the House at risk, which is true.
Yes,
I think it's going to be a very competitive race because there's so many other things going on that are going to hurt Republicans, including January 6th, rejection of January 6th, refusal to talk about January 6th. All of that's going to hurt Republicans. And the growing economy is going to help Democrats. And Joe Biden's going to help Democrats because it's really hard to be mad at him. So everybody decides to be mad at Kamala Harris instead because it's much easier.
Yeah, I don't even find it that easy myself, but okay, others do. And, others differ.
She tweeted something about Memorial Day, which you probably don't even remember, but that's worthwhile because you're going to take that anger right into 2022.
Yeah, people will hang on to it right through next Memorial Day and on and on and on and on. Nothing else will happen between now and November 22.
Right. Or as Todd Schulte puts it, find somebody who loves you like operatives love managing expectations and overspinning special election results early in the cycle.
I don't think I can figure that one out, but there's a joke in there. I see it.
Yeah. So it's both a fun activity and one I've done myself, he says. And so, it's definitely worthwhile.
I'm glad he's entertained.
I think it's at least as much fun as any other tweet you might read first thing in the morning.
Yes.
At breakfast,
All right.
So these things happen.
It's good news.
Dave
Welcome
Leonard,
to Congress to Angela Lansbury, then.
Yeah, David Linhart has a great post today on pundits and how good they are.
Pundits.
Well, actually, it's not really about that, but it's about that.
Oh.
So his topic is, when the CDC loosened its mask guidance 3 weeks ago, many people were anxious. Would it lead unvaccinated people to take off their masks and cause a surge of new cases?
Well, that's
and so far the answer is no.
In there. Yeah, it might, but we haven't seen the cases.
Cases keep falling. Vaccinations of 16 and overs have stopped falling. In fact, they've leveled out. And the CDC announced its new mask guidelines on May 13th. Since then, cases have continued to decline at the same rate as before. So actually, the country is doing relatively well in regard to dropping cases. The rest of the world, not so much. We still have to worry about variants. When they get here, what may happen is the unvaccinated may see a surge, but we'll see. Overall, daily new COVID cases, he writes, in the U.S. have fallen by almost 75% since mid-April and by more than 90% from the peak in January. And why haven't looser mask guidelines led to more cases? A crucial point is the loosened guidelines probably didn't cause many people to change their behavior in ways that created new risk. And you can read this as and this is why what governors do doesn't matter as much as they think, or they want you to think.
As governors want.
Because if you get rid of all the mask mandates and make them illegal, people will still wear masks because you can't mandate that the individuals can't wear them, only the businesses can't.
Can in Virginia, but yeah, well, that's true. And we've dropped our mask mandate, and I don't know. I still have it on when I went into places.
Well, that's the point. Yeah. See, people do what they do. And so whether it's CDC or whether it's governors, people do what they do. It doesn't matter if vaccinated people, he writes, go maskless more often because they're almost never going to get or spread the virus. And it won't change things if unvaccinated people keep doing what they were already doing because they were already doing it.
Yes.
They weren't wearing masks anyway.
Everyone. Right.
So the only newly worrisome scenarios involve unvaccinated people who had been wearing masks because of the CDC guidelines to take the masks off.
Right. And luckily they're now a minority. So
that's a small number.
Yeah, well,
so for vaccinations, after the CDC announced the new guidelines, vaccinations surged.
Okay.
Traffic to vaccines.gov surged. And more concretely, the vaccination trends changed. Instead of dropping, it's now leveled off. And so from May 14th until now, it's basically a steady line of people getting their vaccines as the people who wanted to wait and see, wait and saw.
Yeah. Well, here it is. You get to take your mask off and do the things you wanted to do. And
right. As a matter of fact, in the Pundit Roundup, I had this really interesting article about using barber shops and beauty salons to convince people to do things, which, of course, I always thought was brilliant because that's where people are.
Yes.
I mean, basically, if you want to
Except for
find
the
out what's
long
going
hairs.
on in town, get your hair cut.
Yeah, right. That's why the Rastafarians never know anything about what's
I don't
happening
know
in
about that,
current
but,
events. I mean, they know
If
lots.
you
it's
go,
just not what the
you'll
gossip
learn
is.
a whole lot because the people who cut your hair listen. They're like bartenders; they hear everything.
Yeah, there's nothing else to do. You're stuck there. People talk.
Right, exactly. So it's just a good sign in terms of how things are going, but also a reminder that changing people's ways of doing things is a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
So his bottom line, it's early, but so far the CDC's looser new mask guidelines haven't led to an increase in cases, and the guidelines do seem to have inspired some Americans to get vaccinated. So the second part of it that you can read into it is that every time something happens, you immediately get a surge of punditry, a wave,
Yeah.
a peak, a deluge, a pandemic
Very nice.
of punditry,
Oh.
explaining to you
Literally.
how what just happened is terrible, awful, the worst thing ever. It's horrible. I can't believe they did this. It ruins everything. I mean, I can't even begin to give you so many examples of how that happened, from the J&J pause to
right.
the CDC guidelines. And in fact, when you go back and look and see what actually happened, not that much changed.
Okay, so that's good. So yeah, tamp down on all the fear. I do recall. I mean, I remember both of them, but just very recently we were, oh my gosh, they really blew it with this messaging. And I guess not so much yet.
Yeah, well, what's your definition of blew it with the messaging, just for the sake of argument? I think they could have done it better. But in terms of really blowing it with the messaging, that would suggest that you should really look at the outcomes to make that judgment, rather than, oh, this doesn't fit with the way I would do it. I like to play armchair quarterback, and so I'm going to yell at them for a whole bunch of things where, in fact, if I were doing it, I'd screw up even more. But you don't need to know that. The point is I'm yelling at them.
True. And, even all
There
the
is
people
no
who
federal
did it.
agency for yelling at me.
All the people who did it, who've been playing COVID pundit for, a year plus now, I don't know where they forgot the whole, well, remember, you have to wait like 2, maybe 3 weeks before you know what is going on. I mean, pundits are pundits. They don't want to wait 3 weeks to find out what the data says. They just want
Well, you know what they're saying now.
But what are they saying now?
Oh, this is crazy. Look how pessimistic people have been.
Oh, it's been a year-long pandemic. People are a little down. True.
Yeah, with
They're cautious about
near
things.
590,000 deaths.
Yes. Well, yeah. By Worldometer's count, is a bit higher. They've surpassed 600,000, but I don't know.
And the actual
Johns
count
Hopkins?
is probably over 900,000.
Yes, that's what they're saying.
Hey,
Yeah.
people are just so pessimistic about this.
I can't imagine why. It's been a year and it's been awful. But okay, yeah, upbeat coronavirus coverage. That's what people are waiting for.
Yeah, well, could always be worse. So I thought I'd
Well,
mention
look,
that.
the vaccine makes you happy because then you don't get sick. So be optimistic about that. That seems fair. And
Well, the vaccines are working. I mean, that's the
what your new
basic
stats
message
say.
here.
People
is
are going
they're
out to
really
get them.
working. Okay, I got a technical question for you. I sent this to you earlier, but I picked it up from Punchbowl News.
Yeah.
A Senate parliamentarian ruling. When Senate left town on Friday, the Parl quietly issued a new ruling, says Jake Sherman. It said majority can use reconciliation twice, but can't do it just to avoid a filibuster.
And yet
How you
that's
prove
why
that,
they use it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
The ruling also said Congress would have to start over, repass a budget in committees, bring them to the floor, and then in the Senate, another vote-a-rama.
Yeah.
And to use reconciliation twice, there'd have to be reasons beyond political expediency, like an economic downturn.
Okay.
So, where do they get this from? And is this one of these things where Chuck Schumer says, that's nice, I want to overrule a parliamentarian on this?
Maybe, especially when it gets subjective. As for the reasons for using reconciliation, I'm not surprised that by the second part. I always assumed that it meant you would have to reformulate the budget in some way, and that would mean action at the budget committee, and that passing a revised budget would come with a vote-a-rama, not only on the budget, but a vote-a-rama on the reconciliation bill in the end, too. So, I don't know. I'm not surprised by that part. I guess this is just their attempt at saying, well, we'd like they really opened the door to all sorts of possible mischief when they said you can use a budget bill or revise a budget bill as many times as you want and use reconciliation as often as you want. And the immediate response was, well, let's use it for everything that there is. And I guess they're trying to preserve the spirit of the Budget Act and the original intent of reconciliation, try to keep it on target as used for budgetary purposes. That never changed anyway. Right. But I guess now they're just saying you shouldn't just revamp the budget 3 or 4 times a year. It's very disruptive and difficult, and you shouldn't just redraw the budget if moving $1 back and forth so that you can use reconciliation to avoid a filibuster. But, I mean, the point of the reason reconciliation is on the books is so that it avoids filibusters. There's no way, I don't know how they're going to make that decision, and that's where they'll be overruling parliamentarians. When parliamentarians say, I feel like this is just to avoid the filibuster, and members of the Senate say, well, I feel
no,
it's not.
It's for a good reason by...
Right. Whether they have a good reason or they don't. If they have a good, strong reason, they'll have a public debate about it. If they have a weak reason, they may just count votes. Yeah. So
so that's how that works.
Okay,
but I thought it was
nice.
Worth listening, bringing it to the attention of your listeners because it's going to come up at some point. After the break, which is about to come up,
right?
A nice article by Bill Scher in Washington Monthly. An infrastructure deal isn't dead yet, and he gets into Joe Manchin's head about what he's thinking, because remember, this whole reconciliation discussion is based on what Sinema and Manchin do.
Right. It's kind of about them. And maybe the parliamentarian thought they would be keeping them happy by saying, well, the rule is that it can't be done just to avoid reconciliation. And then if they manage to get the votes together and make it clear that, either listen to the parliamentarian, influence the parliamentarian, overrule the parliamentarian. In the end, they get to say, see, if we're having it happen, it must not be just about that.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Remember, you can only listen to the next segment if you're not doing it to avoid the filibuster. And that'll be pretty subjective. It's going to be interesting to see how they try and enforce that. And whatever, man. I don't know what.
The fun thing is
trying to be
watching
tough.
David invoke cloture to get a word in edgewise when I'm speaking. So, it happens.
Right, and the music fights me too.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Constantly
this
being
piece
played off.
in the Washington Monthly, an infrastructure deal isn't dead yet,
Yes,
talks
right.
about the fact that there does seem to be some serious negotiation despite all the posturing. But you can skip the whole thing and get down to the last 3 paragraphs here and get into Joe Manchin's head. Manchin doesn't have to do what Biden or Schumer or Sanders or Durbin want. If the loud and proud bipartisan centrist wants more talking with Republicans, he'll keep talking. So trying to read Manchin's mind can drive a political analyst mad. But I doubt that telling Manchin he's naive just because one of his attempts at bipartisanship fell through, which is to say the January 6th commission, will prompt him to reverse his course. Bipartisan-minded politicians aren't quick to draw the same connections as partisans or even everyday politicians. To them, it's always a new day. Leave failure in the past. Start again. I mean, you have to have that mindset if you're in Congress because, like, most of what you do is completely futile.
Yeah. I don't know how else you'd make it day to day.
Right. So the last paragraph here is the good one. At the risk of playing psychic, I think it's safe to assert that what Manchin fundamentally wants is the power to shape legislation. If Republicans assist with giving him that power, he'll pursue bipartisanship. If Republicans are too stingy and obstructionist, Manchin will turn back to his fellow Democrats, and he'll wield power in the reconciliation process, which, of course, as we learned just a few minutes ago, is not completely about the filibuster.
Right. It can't be.
Except for the parts that it is.
Right.
If such a point of exasperation is ever to be reached, it will be decided by Manchin and Manchin alone. As one anonymous source in Manchin's orbit recently told the Daily Beast, Joe Manchin doesn't give a flying F about progressive backlash or caucus politics.
True.
Us pundits won't be able to take any one failure and use it to browbeat him into submission, which is relevant because during the very moving speech that Biden had in Tulsa yesterday,
yes,
he called out Manchin and Sinema not by name, but by process.
I see.
You know, some of my fellow Republicans, some of my fellow Democrats vote with the Republicans more than they vote with us, which is a little hyperbole allowed to politicians. But basically trying to make the point that if you want to get stuff done, you have to get stuff done. So it's just interesting to get into Manchin's head this way and think about what he wants. And listen, that he wants to have the power to broker the final deal makes total sense, which is why you should never give up on him. Because that's not the same thing as I refuse to go along with my fellow Democrats. I'm going to vote with the Republicans. Not if it doesn't get anything done. He doesn't want that. He wants to be the decider.
Yeah.
So he'll take whatever – look, if they do it bipartisan way, then, you know, he gets to be the decider. And if the Republicans just walk away, then he'll have to decide to be the decider among his fellow Democrats, where he can make all sorts of demands and get them.
He gets to do it either way. So
yes,
you know, but not for long. I mean,
no, but he's taking advantage of what he has, and you know,
but
it's his job. You know, you can't fault him for that.
I'll think about it. But all right, it's certainly a great point that it's very unlikely that saying, "See, I gave you one example," would convince anybody of anything. Much
particularly
less
if you're not inclined to be convinced.
Mm-hmm. Right. True. So I don't know how many it'll take. And there may be no number, but one. You shouldn't be surprised that one isn't doing it. Right. That's a good point.
All right. So let's change topics a little bit. And the reason I started looking at this is because of an Axios article by Mike Allen, which had the very intriguing title, QAnon infects churches.
Is it
okay? And this came from a PRRI poll. QAnon conspiracy theories by party affiliation.
Okay, I wouldn't even have thought to poll that, but all right.
Right. Maybe well, if you look at all Americans, 15%, and they highlight, you know, and those of us who just make fun of them and ignore them and just like eyes roll and turn away, have to appreciate the three basic tenets of QAnonism.
Okay.
All
right.
Number one, the government, media, and financial worlds in the U.S. are controlled by a group of Satan-worshipping pedophiles who run a global child sex trafficking operation, the whole Pizzagate thing.
Duh, obviously it is, yes. Okay, I'm with them so far.
Percent to agree, all Americans 15. Republicans 23, Democrats 8, Independents 14. So, you know, there's a low level, although slightly higher. 23 is always the number for me with Republicans. That's the number that approved of Nixon at the time he resigned. So there's always been that strain in Republicanism going back way back. Okay. But they absolutely agree with this. And when you look at those numbers, okay,
yes.
A new poll shows the bogus teachings have become as widespread as some denominations. If you look at, you know, what are the numbers among Americans of various religious denominations, they rival these numbers.
Well, you know, it's a dangerous thing to say you're bigger than Jesus.
Now, point number 2.
All right.
It's beyond Pizzagate. Point number 2, there's a storm coming soon that will sweep away the elites in power and restore the rightful leaders.
Right.
That's where Trump pedophiles is back in Mar-a-Lago saying that I'm going to be reinstated in August.
Yes.
As reported by Maggie Haberman.
Right. That's a threat, by the way. Secret Service, check it out.
Yes, exactly. And again, who believes it? All Americans, 20%. Republicans, 28%. Independents, 18%. and Democrats 14. So
14.
Democrats fear it, Republicans long for it, but there's that. And then the third thing, because things have gotten so far off track, true American patriots may have to resort to violence in order to save our country. Mm-hmm. Again, Republicans 28. That's lower. The storm coming is the most popular of the three tenets of QAnonism.
Yes.
And the government, media, and financial world, Satan worshipping pedophiles, is tied pretty much with things have gotten so far off track that violence is coming. Those are a little less popular, but still there. Why it matters? The problem with misinformation and disinformation is that people, lots of people, believe it, and they don't believe reality coming from the media and even their ministers. Russell Moore, one of America's most respected evangelical Christian thinkers, well, that's what Axios says, told me he's talking literally every day to pastors of virtually every denomination who are exhausted by the theories blowing through their churches or communities. Okay? And several pastors told me they once had to talk to parents dismayed about the unchristian beliefs of their grown children, and now the tables have turned. Oh. What does he mean by that? He means that a lot of the QAnon folks are like boomers.
Huh. Okay.
We'll get to that, I hope, in a few minutes. But there's a faction amongst QAnonism that basically is older boomers who get all their information from chain letter emails, and now the internet equivalent, which is Facebook.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, that stunning window into the country's congregations followed a major poll out last week. 15% of Americans agree with QAnon contention government, media, financial worlds in the U.S. are controlled by a group of Satan-worshipping pedophiles. Well, after Jeffrey Epstein, you can understand why people sort of think that.
Sure.
Now, for those who hope that the events of January 6th are in our past, like the Republican Party leadership, for example, I think this data gives little in the way of assurance, said Kristen Demez, Calvin University historian of gender, faith, and politics, and author of Jesus and John Wayne.
Jesus and John Wayne.
Yeah,
wow, okay.
I think I'm going to wait for the movie on that one.
God's Guns, Grits, Jesus, John Wayne. A lot of alliteration in the
something. The poll found that Hispanic Protestants, 26%, and white evangelical Protestants, 25%, were more likely to agree with QAnon than other groups. Black Protestants were 15, white Catholics were 11, white mainline Protestants were 10. And as a New York Times headline put it, QAnon now is popular in the U.S. as some major religions. Now, Demez told me, Mike Allen, that the factors that produced this result include the decades conservative evangelicals spent sowing seeds of doubt about the mainstream media, but also an emphasis in certain circles on deciphering biblical prophecies that bear some similarities to decoding QAnon conspiracies. The idea there's a secret meaning hidden within the text that can be discerned by individuals who have eyes to see. And this isn't just a problem for faith communities, it's deeply troubling in terms of the health of our democracy. So since QAnon's more of a movement than an organization, it has to be addressed at these levels. And I think churches is a great place to do it.
It would be interesting if they started preaching that the QAnon conspiracy was anti-Christian.
Right. And Natalie Jackson, research director at PRRI, who released the poll, said the finding doesn't mean 15% of Americans are spending their lives only paying attention to Q, but it does mean the group is amenable to believing the conspiracy theories. So these are persuadable folks who are actively recruited by Q groups, and there's a whole style about how that happens. So that led me to this really fascinating piece here, a two-part piece here by a author called Dappergander.
Okay.
Two-parter. Why did QAnon factionalize?
Oh.
And perhaps even the more interesting second part, the explainer of factions, F-A-Q-T-I-O-N-S.
Huh. Okay. FAQ.
Right? The increasing factionalization of QAnon in May 2019 was noted, and at the time, this author easily identified three chief factions: the super spies, the evangelical boomers, and then you see the relevance to the Axios article I was reading to you, and the people who think reptilians are real.
Oh my.
Okay. Now, nobody in QAnon uses these terms and probably wouldn't accept them if they heard them. QAnon believers think of themselves as highly individual free thinkers and resent being grouped.
Oh, yeah, sure, of course. Right.
But
they do their own research.
One way you can identify them is listen to popular Q figures complain about each other. Every few months, there's a blow up where different promoters post diatribes about the sets of beliefs they think reflect poorly on the movement. And there aren't hard and fast groups, but some of the groups organically grew out of and away from another over time. And sometimes you can look at it in terms of the technology level, and sometimes you can look at it in terms of the spirituality level.
Okay.
Right? The more you think that Trump was sent here by God, and therefore that's part of the grand plan to have him reinstated in triumph, that's a spirituality sort of thing. And the more you think that the deep state is controlling your body through vaccines that'll change your DNA, that's more the technology side.
Yeah, technology, of course.
Right? Well, all of this is in scare quotes.
Yes, right. Okay.
Right, spirituality and technology. Okay? So you start with faction 0, which are the people that grew out of the 4chan right-wing discussion boards.
Okay. The original.
Which, we well know.
The
These are the nutters who just aren't welcome anywhere else, who do everything ironically. That's where it all started.
I see. Yes.
But then the super spies emerged. They're true believers in the original promise of Q that a highly placed intelligence operative is leaking above top secret information detailing Donald Trump as playing a masterful 6-dimensional chess game against his enemies with such brilliant military precision they'll all be defeated and arrested for treason.
Right.
But you're probably saying to yourself, but isn't that what all QAnon followers believe? And the answer is yes. It's one of the central tenets.
Yeah.
Okay. But of the two original factions, the super spies were almost solely responsible for creating decodes and crafting narrative, and you have to read this and we'll explain to you what it means, because it's all a video game, and you get sucked into it.
Yes,
and
okay.
That's part of the recruitment thing.
They're Talmudic Q people.
Yeah, exactly. Super spies believe we live in a world that is depicted in a Tom Clancy novel, that everybody's playing a carefully crafted double, triple, super secret probation kind of way. And the deep state and the Q team possess heightened level of technology that's unavailable to civilians and military. But their faith in technology is like restricted to what you might see in a James Bond film. Not really like out there, but sort of plausible speculative. Body doubles, but not clones. It's possible to alter the weather, but not with a laser cannon.
Yeah,
they believe that AI algorithms allow Q to predict future events, but not time travel. They believe the pandemic was engineered to socially condition the population to accept greater government control, but not that vaccines alter your DNA or contain mind control devices. So the super spies basically are the people who read thriller novels, but don't particularly like science fiction.
I see. All right, right.
And it's a group of them. You go to in the before times when you're at the airport, there would be the section of Tom Clancy novels, which is different than the science fiction section, which is different than the mysteries, which is different than the self-help groups. And basically what this author is doing is sort of dividing Q into factions based on, what section of the bestseller bookstore would you stop into in order to, where would you be found standing in front of what section?
All right.
And it sort of fits. And then there's the spirituality group, the low to mainline Christianity parts. They're not necessarily religious, somewhat performatively religious. They're the people who storm the Capitol and say it's in the name of Jesus, but it's not really.
It's pronounced Jesus, by the way.
They only use the Christianity to virtue signal to others, right? And that's as soon as you attack somebody and they immediately retreat into, God forgives.
Oh, yeah. Oh, once you're caught doing something.
Yeah, exactly. But only that.
Okay, right.
That's the only time you ever bring it up. Right?
I know.
And then the other faction that joined QAnon quickly are the Q-vangelicals. They're first made up largely of refugees from Pizzagate and the satanic ritual abuse. And after, Edgar Welch stormed Comet Pizza and that didn't go well, they didn't know what to do. But they didn't really start gravitating to QAnon until later.
No.
And that only happened when Q started talking more openly about the Rothschilds and the Vatican and rituals.
Oh, stuff they knew about already. Facts,
So in the bookstore, I guess they'd be, what's his name, Dan the Da Vinci Code guy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know,
Right.
but I know the book.
It's those
the title.
books. That's
Yes.
this section.
I gotcha. Okay.
Thank you.
Different.
I'm just trying to put it in a way that relates, to like, I don't. Oh, this I get. Okay.
Yeah.
You don't want to read Tom Clancy novels.
There's no sports metaphor for it.
What's his name? Dan Brown. You want to read those novels about how, sections of the church, including the Templars, are still active.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Background sort of way that hide their true intentions from everybody else. And that's why Vatican rituals, Rothschilds, and all that sort of stuff. It was Q evangelicals that brought the theory of adrenochrome harvesting into QAnon, a subject that Q themselves never addressed.
Really?
The cabal means the deep state.
Huh.
And that's due to Q evangelical influence. The biggest difference between Q evangelicals and the religiously minded boomer chans, who would soon follow them, is that Q evangelicals are already very conspiracy minded and were already practicing the use of the internet as a result. And the boomer chans are the ones that just sort of got into it because they're really into these chain emails that your brother-in-law sent you, and then you started diving into it. So, you can just spend the whole rest of the day reading this. It's just so fascinating. But a lot of it rings true. And again, for those of you following along at home, if you're really trying to figure out where Q evangelicals and boomer chans and super spies and everybody else in the QAnon world fit, just imagine them in a bookstore and try to figure out which section of books they'd be standing in front of thumbing through.
I guess so, right. That's interesting. So I guess if you ever were foolish enough to discuss this stuff with one of them or confront one or something like that, yeah, you'll probably find out. You say, that's crazy that you believe that lizard people and satanic pedophiles are doing this and that. And they'll say, please, I don't believe in the lizard people.
Well, but this is how, when you sort of peripherally get exposed to this sort of thing, you find out, oh, these people also think that JFK Jr. is still alive.
Oh, right, yes. And I never did get an explanation of that, but what's the point? But yeah, I guess I don't know whether they're a faction all to themselves or whether that's a tenet of one of the factions, but I guess you can. Well,
it's a tenet of the faction called the Lone Gunmen, who are late adapters to QAnon. They basically just brought their conspiracy theories with them.
I see.
How JFK was assassinated, Lee Harvey Oswald, the Clinton Foundation, no video of the plane hitting the Pentagon. These are some of the lists.
A lot of people do believe a bunch of those things.
Barack Obama doesn't have a proper birth certificate. 9/11 was an inside job. You take all those people and you just glom them onto QAnon because they're already looking for conspiracies, and QAnon is perfect for that.
I guess so, and it's an acceptance circle there. I believe this crazy conspiracy theory, which has fallen out of fashion. Nobody believes this one anymore, but everyone here is crazy, so come on in.
Right. And then, and then things start going really bizarre.
But it's worse.
I mean, this is bizarre enough, but you perhaps have not heard of the Team Tesla theory.
No, I don't think so.
This is where the technology comes in. Nikola Tesla's lost technology was found by people, and that's where time travel came in. And that's where Q has all of this information that the rest of us don't have access to because he can see into the future based on Nikola Tesla's lost technology.
Right. Well, where did he last leave it? We can go back and find it. I thought this was about the cars. And
so time travel, earthquake machines, unlimited free electricity, anything that Nikola Tesla could imagine is accepted as not only plausible, this author writes, but real, controlled in whole or part by the Trump family, and soon to be released to the general population at a future time of Donald Trump's choosing. These folks are the most technologically oriented and the least religious.
Okay.
They think the awakening or the storm is all going to be about technology, not religion, whereas other factions think it's all about the revealed word coming back.
All right.
So it's a big tent sort of thing.
I guess
and gives you a lot of different ways that you can get in there.
Nikola
Tesla. It's fascinating to read. And again, just remember, if it's all getting confusing, just sort them by what book section in the bookstore you find yourself in front of. If you had to grab a quick novel to read on the plane, where would you go? Science fiction, mysteries, Dan Brown explainers about the
great
Catholic
metaphor,
Church, whatever.
Yeah, we're gonna have to refine this. This is a very good metaphor. It helps explain all that.
That's mine. That's not hers.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to
work on
conceptualize
an
it
article
in a way that helps me, place where this belongs.
Yeah, normally you go to sports for these things, but this is innovative and new. I like the idea of using the bookstore to sort people out. Which faction is responsible for the belief that apple cider vinegar can do anything? I'm curious about this. My computer tells me that it cures everything and melts fat overnight, and I'm just wondering whether that's because the unlimited supply of electricity from Nikola Tesla thing. That obviously is true. There's this thing that utility companies hate and don't want you to know about. I haven't clicked on it yet, but it totally does this.
What about the Trump family?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's
Abby's telling me my section's at an end. She got bored with Q, so I'm going.
I can understand that. All right, very good. She's got to get to the milk bone section, or whatever it is she prefers, and we can appreciate that. Thanks very much, Greg. We'll see you tomorrow, or we never see you, but you get the idea. All right.
So we'll talk more tomorrow, and we'll see what happens between now and then.
Yeah, I'll try to figure out what QAnon faction to join. Thank you. You do the same.
Interesting reading, though. Take your time. David will have it in the roundup that he always publishes with Scott Anderson's help, and it's just a really, really good read.
Yes, I will take a look at it, and you'll all appreciate it because this one is printed on or is published on directly on Patreon. I guess this is something that this person has on their Patreon account, the blog there, and that will remind you when you're there to donate money to, I don't know, anybody who you like who might happen to have a Patreon account that you feel like chipping in for. I'm not saying, I'm not directing you, I'm not making the choice for you. Do your own internet research and come to your own conclusion. That's what it's all about. All right, let's see. Beyond all of this, this is kind of fascinating. I like the comparison here. But let's see, just a few minutes here before our top of the hour break, thanks to Greg for bringing us so far along here. There's a couple of stories popped up this morning. We spoke yesterday a little bit about the outrage of the day mechanism and, how much credence to give any of the current outrages, given that it is most likely part of a conveyor belt operation, basically just throwing everything that they can come up with against the wall and seeing what sticks. And one of the things that I guess they tried yesterday and didn't stick. Like, I would like to have a couple examples of, give me some failed examples of attempts at generating outrage and see, one, how ridiculous they are. And I guess really when they're held up against the ones that succeed and have people actually traffic in them, they're no more or less ridiculous than anything else. But I guess the fact that they didn't become popular makes them seem even more ridiculous. Matthew Gertz at Media Matters, I guess, whose whole job is to monitor those things, was tweeting that one of the things we were supposed to be mad about yesterday, according to Fox News, and that's, I think, one of the official, maybe the top leading official outlet of stuff that's supposed to make you angry today, and some of it works and some of it doesn't. Over the weekend it was Kamala Harris said the wrong thing about Memorial Day weekend, right, and that one happened to work. So now that one seems, although it was always crazy, it seems somehow like less crazy because it's kind of been mainstreamed, if only because it's people talking about how crazy it is. But Matt Gertz has this "what we were mad about yesterday" tweet, and I don't know whether that's an ongoing series or anything, but screenshots tell us from various Fox News programs that yesterday, if you watched Fox News, you were supposed to be writing your congressional representatives about your anger over Seattle building a woke waterfront park. I don't know what that means. I don't know whether Seattle is building a waterfront park at all. I don't know what they think woke means. It means something different every day. But basically, it's an article of faith that woke things are terrible just as critical race theory is terrible. And some of it is actually, the two are probably closely related. But it's code word for you're supposed to hate this thing. So that was the first chyron. The second one here, I think that's, I don't know, I can't identify the different people. They all look pretty much the same. The anchors here. New park in Seattle embraces woke culture. And again, I don't know how a park does this, but don't look for, sense in it or anything. Here's another one, another Fox person announcing something, blah, blah, blah. And the Chiron says, woke waterfront. Seattle Park showcases discriminatory history. And I don't even know what the actual story is. But sometimes I'm interested in getting at what the kernel of truth in here. And then another one, this one from Fox Business Network, the wokest waterfront in the U.S. I'm getting the sense that maybe they're developing this park somewhere. Oh, look, somebody did the work here. Samwise, who tweets under the handle of Sam Smash 74, replying to Matt Gertz saying, I live in the Northwest and spend a lot of time in Seattle. Had no idea what this was talking about, so I searched it. They've copy-pasted this article all over the conservative part of the internet. Completely manufactured outrage. Of course it's manufactured outrage, but I'm just curious, what is it? And I was going to guess, and maybe I'll guess quick before we read the thing here. I was guessing that maybe they've made a new park, and maybe there was a historical marker erected at the park that might tell the story of some particularly egregious episode of racial discrimination or worse on that site, and that's what makes it a woke park, and therefore we have to get rid of it, even though if we had done it in statue form, presumably it would be allowed and they would never be able to touch it. But I guess they must have, Sam must have searched the topic, and the screenshots here just display how many hits they got on the topic, which is quite a few, which is to say that there's a lot of activity about it. Let's see. Seattle's $700 million woke waterfront may backfire, critics warn. For 66 years, Seattle's downtown was separated from its waterfront by a hulking double-decker viaduct. When it was blown up in 2019 over earthquake safety concerns, the possibilities seemed endless. Now construction is underway on a 26-block something waterfront park, but I guess they'll be talking about redlining and community destruction. Yikes. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I actually decided to open up that Fox News article just to see what's the rest of the story here. So now I'm just guessing again before. Why not just read the article? I don't know. But it seems to me that I guess maybe they're making a big deal of the fact that this waterfront area could have been an area accessible by the community that could have been developed in the past, either for economic development or just recreational use, but has been inaccessible to most of Seattle because of this giant infrastructure project that was put up without regard for what it would do, cutting this area off from the rest of the city, as sometimes major interstate highways do. We've mentioned that in the past, at certain times areas of the city that end up being destroyed for progress, to bring the interstate through, or that they don't necessarily need to destroy the neighborhood, but it cuts off a neighborhood. And guess what? It's almost always a disadvantaged neighborhood to begin with. It only exacerbates things from then on. And I wonder if that's what it said at the bottom of this. And that undoing this separation, but noting that it had taken place, is too woke because because it mentions the idea, the concept of some sort of equality or reestablishment of equity or racial justice, God forbid, should be mentioned in all of this. So where do we leave off? Right. The construction is well underway on a 26-block, $700 million waterfront park. It promises to be an open space with stunning views of the Puget Sound and an agenda aimed at dismantling racism, which is good even among those who watch Fox News. Racism, they will still acknowledge as a bad thing. You just define it differently. Dismantling racism is always awesome. But whatever. So I guess essentially this would be otherwise good news anywhere else. The economic development of a waterfront park, that's fantastic. Businesses will locate there. People will go there and spend their money and stimulate the economy. But it's happening in Seattle, where sometimes there are confrontations over economic development, whether locally or globally. And sometimes there's Antifa, so we can't let them have anything. The whole city has to suffer. Anyway, so I guess the real complaint is, in building this new park, they're going to say, by the way, the fact that this park is new has a story attached to it. And the story is that this was always inaccessible to you because of issues of that have at least some threads probably of economic injustice and racism attached to it. And if we tell you about it, the whole park is ruined. Don't spend your money there. That's what's going on here. Friends of Waterfront Park is a nonprofit tasked with raising $100 million for construction and then managing the park's entertainment and security. You know, a public-private partnership, the darling of centrists and conservatives everywhere. Right? So what's wrong? On its website, this group, Friends of Waterfront Park, touts Friends of Waterfart. That's really an even better name for it. They should just do that, and then all the conservatives can be happy. See, we got the last laugh. Waterfront. But let's go with it. Friends of Waterfart Seattle. Why not? Acknowledges that historic and existing systemic racism is embedded in our city. And so there you go. Quite honestly, why aren't we executing these people already? Their website says this thing. Oh my God, we have to put a stop to it. $700 million could be invested in this untold economic stimulus in the future. But remember when their website said that they were acknowledging that historic and existing systemic racism is embedded in the city? Is it? If it is, they acknowledge it. That's a good thing. If it's not, and they acknowledge it, then they're just wrong on a website. That someone has been wrong on the internet. We must stop this $700 million project. It also states the goal is to create inclusive spaces for community-driven cultural events where all people, specifically, and there's some ellipses here, so we don't know exactly what's been eliminated, but to tell you about the ellipses, the goal is to create inclusive spaces for community-driven cultural events, ellipsis, where all people, ellipses. This is very suggestive. So many ellipses in just so few words. Specifically, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. That, of course, attached to the new and popular but growingly irritating acronym BIPOC. I think a lot of people are kind of getting tired of lengthening the thing. There's a lot of backlash, even among good progressives, as I've seen in the last couple of years. People are just, I don't know, we need better acronyms. People are unhappy with their acronyms. Anyway, that doesn't really matter. What matters is the concept here. They're going to create this inclusive space because, you know, that's what economic development is all about. And specifically what? Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as underserved communities, feel welcome and safe. You can't have that. It's too woke to say that you want to be able to make people feel welcome at this economic development. Freelance writer Liz Economou, how about that? That's my best shot at that name. Sent her resume in for the marketing director job, but when she asked for current examples of embedded racism, she never heard back. Okay? I mean, by the way, you should probably wait until you get the job to ask that question. Like, okay, just to be on the same page here, what are these aspects? I mean, she may not have heard back because, honestly, if you're a job seeker and they decide they're not going to interview you for whatever reason, you very rarely hear anything back these days. But okay, this means something. Why does it mean something? Because Liz Economou is apparently in touch with people at Fox News, so she must be a good person. Anyway, she then looked at the descriptions of all the job openings at Friends of Waterfront Park Seattle and was surprised. Among the responsibilities were quote, engage in regular conversations about race and equity through all staff meetings, trainings, and a DEI, or Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, book club. I didn't want it at all, said Economou. I want a job based on meritocracy, based on what I can contribute, not based on whether I'm woke enough. Not that they said that that was what it's going to be, but they said, look, in this job, this is the way we want to approach our task. And she said, I don't like approaching tasks that way. And surprise, she never heard back from them. What a weird thing. They decided maybe she wasn't a good fit. But, you know, if she feels entitled to the job, then that's the end of it. Anyway, this is actually kind of fascinating just in terms of figuring out, one, what the reality is behind Fox News chyrons. Two, the fact that they threw it out there and nobody gives a goddamn one way or the other. And that's good news. And I guess that's probably a good reminder for me that we should just quit this story entirely. But just to see where the rest of it goes. It looks to be too long to spend any more time on. But it is kind of a fascinating study of sorts. Let's see, there's a section on what does woke mean, and I don't think that they'll get to the bottom of it correctly. It might be entertaining all on its own just to see them try to fumble through it. Oh, actually, it's not all that long. The rest of the thing is comments, the comments section, and ads. But there you go. So the whole thing is you can't have a park that's woke because reasons. One, a park can't be woke, of course. Two, woke is bad. Three, what does woke mean? Is the last section of the thing. By the way, what do they think woke means? It's not all that long. Are you curious? Now I am. Friends of Waterfront Seattle responded, we hire candidates based on their skills, experience, and qualifications. And remember, I guess that's supposed to be a response to the Liz Economou, whoever that is, objection to the way they described their job. I don't know whether there was a real conversation or not, but okay. But Friends, that is the organization's wokeness, is already on display, so you know it sucks, right? Before the beautiful views at Pier 62, park goers are greeted by a huge fence sign that talks about past discrimination faced by dock workers in Seattle. Okay, you know, history. We should do it with this. If you did it with a statue, they would have no problem. All around the railing are small signs featuring hand-picked artists. And they were hand-picked. So there you go. A photographer says his pictures reflect the ongoing history of interactions between the colonizer and the colonized. Another artist says he sees a solemn future fortified by the grief and loss of our natural world. Mike Sotelo, who represents minority business owners, in what capacity, we don't know, we're not told, is worried the messaging will drive tourists away and the resulting open spaces will fill with homeless people who already occupy several city parks. So we can't have another park because people will go there. But some of them will be homeless. And, you know, they'll all be homeless because no one will go there because who wants to read about colonizers and colonized? More than the homeless do, I guess. I don't know. No one likes to go on a Saturday afternoon to spend time with their family and get hit with guilt and told all these negative things about something they had no control over, said Sotelo, spelled differently this time for some reason, president of the Ethnic Chambers of Commerce Coalition. The $1.3 million no-bid agreement Friends of Waterfront Seattle signed with the city calls for 35% of all park programs to be geared toward underserved communities. Seattle residents and tourists will get to see exactly what that means when the waterfront park's construction is completed in 2024. But no reason to wait to complain about it when Fox News will prompt you to do that starting now. Anyway, I guess we should all wait and see what a disaster another waterfront development and another major city in America is. Or, of course, we could start complaining about it right now and save the $700 million and spend it instead on, I don't know what. So there you go. We've got to be angry about there being a woke park. Just thought one quick, glance at the fringes there. It is kind of interesting to monitor. But again, we probably should think about absorbing the lesson that we totally missed yesterday of, remember, This is all part of a industrial-sized output, mechanism. They're basically going to throw that out there, and if they can get it to stick, then it's tomorrow's make or break outrage, and all members of Congress will be concerned about what's happening on the waterfront park in Seattle. And we'll have pretty soon news that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has signed an executive order forbidding Seattle from building its park in Florida. And thank God, dusting your hands off, that's all been taken care of at last. Okay, what other things going on here that we might spend some time on? I saw a couple of articles approaching this and some comments on Twitter pointing me to this Texas Tribune piece, more about the Texas elections bill that has received so much criticism of late. Yesterday, we read through Daniel Dale's pushback on the early criticism over the provisions governing how many people you could drive to the polls and getting some of the details included in that. And it ended up being not quite as egregious as it was first made out to be. What else is getting that treatment these days? The Texas Tribune writes here, Patrick Svitek, S-V-I-T-E-K, that's my best guess, writes, Republicans say they'll tweak part of Texas elections bill that they'll have to come back in the special session for, right? Which is criticized for its impact on black churchgoers. We mentioned yesterday in our analysis and reading Daniel Dale's analysis that this is the provision about driving people to the polls probably aimed, at least in part, toward the GOTV efforts among the black community and black churchgoers, souls to the polls, etc., but not exclusively, because the provision that we were talking about yesterday was about bringing people who are ill and otherwise either disabled or ill and can't actually physically make it into the polls, doing curbside voting. This one's slightly different. There was another provision aimed more squarely at the Souls to the Polls programs. The provision this time in the under the microscope deals with the window for early voting on Sundays, and the current version of the bill raised concerns that it would hinder the GOTV efforts by black churches. And the article explains it this way. 2 days after House Democrats broke quorum to kill Texas's elections overhaul legislation, Republicans say they plan to use a special session to change a controversial provision that raised concerns it would hurt get out the vote efforts by black churches. A last-minute addition to the final version of Senate Bill 7, negotiated behind closed doors, set a new window for early voting on Sundays, limiting it from 1 p.m. to 9 o'clock p.m. Democrats and voting rights advocates said GOP lawmakers were targeting souls to the polls, the longtime practice by black congregations that encourages members to go vote after Sunday morning services. In an interview Tuesday with NPR, one of the negotiators, Representative Travis Clardy, that's the name, of Nacogdoches, said the 1 p.m. start time was an error and that it should have been 11 a.m. Now, A is a different letter than P. I don't know if you noticed that. But I guess the claim is, it was a typo. We only typed 1, not 2. And also we changed the A to a P, but whatever. Despite this claim, no Republicans raised an issue with the start time during the final debate over the bill, and one of them even defended it. Clardy told NPR that the Sunday start time was one of the things I look forward to fixing the most, you see, in the special session. That was not intended to be reduced, Clardy said. I think there was call it a mistake if you want to. What should have been 11 was actually printed up as 1. Now that's an interesting excuse, particularly if the current law actually calls for allowing the polls to be open from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m., and they say it was not intended to be reduced. Okay, if you didn't intend to change existing law, which allows Sunday voting from 11 to 9, then why is there a provision in this bill dealing with Sunday voting, which is already exactly where you want it to be? It's very difficult to believe that it was just a typo if you didn't want to change existing law. But anyway, lawmakers are set to revisit the legislation in a yet-to-be-called special session after Democrats staged a walkout late Sunday night that blocked passage of SB 7 in the regular session, which ended Monday. In a Texas Tribune interview later Tuesday, Governor Greg Abbott, I think made mention of this, maybe not. I don't know if we managed to get it on the air yesterday, but you probably saw this story. Governor Greg Abbott said he was, first of all, said he was unaware of this mistake, but I just wanted to note for the record, I thought they were going here. Greg Abbott says not only is he going to call the special session, but he's also now threatening to veto that part of the Texas state budget which deals with, I think he has the line item veto in Texas, unless they do a separate bill on it. But he's going to veto the legislature's appropriations, so that I guess the idea is probably, he probably thinks he will be withholding their pay. And I don't know what the Texas Constitution says about paying its legislators, if it's at all like the federal Constitution, which guarantees that they will receive their payment. That's very convenient, isn't it? And so it might be ineffective as against them, but if you were to block appropriations for the operations of the legislature, it would mean that they couldn't pay their staff. That's a possibility. But anyway, just sort of an interesting and, vindictive, very Trumpy stance on this thing. If you're going to pass or block bills that I want from being passed, then I'm going to withhold funding for the actual operations of the state. Like the minimum basic things that even a libertarian would say the state needs to pay for. I'm going to out-libertarian the libertarians and become gimmitarian. But anyway, as for this specific provision, Greg Abbott said he was unaware of the specific mistake that Clardy was referring to, but that he had heard there were clerical errors with the final version of SB 7. Good reason to not pass it, by the way. And that he would be open to making modifications to Sunday voting rules. After Clardy's interview with NPR, another GOP negotiator and the bill's House sponsor, Representative Briscoe Cain of Deer Park. That name rings a bell, not only because it's ridiculous. The two of these guys. What's the first guy's name? Clardy. What's his first name? Oh, okay, Travis. I've heard that name before. Okay, Travis Clardy. But Briscoe Cain, isn't he the guy who, it's a Texas legislature. I was going to say he's the guy with the big cowboy hat, so that doesn't help anything. But he's the one, like a goofy dweeby guy with a big cowboy hat and maybe wearing a bow tie. But didn't he fly during the election? Maybe to Philadelphia possibly, and he was going to fight the battles in court and on the streets if necessary to make Trump the way. I think we've called his name on this. Anyway, he's the House sponsor of the bill, which probably tells you what their real intentions were. Anyway, he says that what Clardy said was true and that lawmakers intended to fix the start time in the special session. But let's just pass it now, just to be sure. Despite the new claims that the 1 p.m. start time was a mistake, Republicans did not flag it as an error in debate over the final version of SB 7 this weekend. In the Senate, SB 7's author, Senator Brian Hughes, spelled with a Y, by the way, stood by the start time, actually, saying, yeah, we did mean 1 p.m. under Democratic questioning late Saturday night. Those election workers want to go to church too, Hughes said, and so that's why it says 1 p.m. and no later than 9 p.m. You can make Sunday service and then go after that. When Senator Royce West, a Dallas Democrat, pressed Hughes on that justification, Hughes admitted it wasn't based on conversations with election workers, but suggested that Souls to the Polls efforts promoted voting after the lunch hour. You can correct me, but Souls to the Polls, I thought we went to church and ate lunch and then voted, Hughes said. But he didn't ask anybody about that one either. All right, whatever. When the House moved Sunday night to pass SB 7, Cain noted that it did not outlaw voting initiatives such as Souls to the Polls. It doesn't outlaw it, but just makes it more difficult. Asked about Clardy's comments Tuesday, Hughes said the intent was to extend the Sunday voting hours and that lawmakers would make this clear in the special session. Current law requires counties with a population of at least 100,000 people to conduct early voting on the last Sunday of the period for at least 5 hours. The final version of SB 7 in the regular session revised that to say counties with a population of 30,000 or more can conduct early voting on the last Sunday of the period for at least 6 hours between 1 and 9 p.m. In the interview with the Tribune, Abbott said he was satisfied with the current version of SB 7 and hoped both chambers would move quickly on it when he does call a special session. Subsequently informed of Clardy's comments to NPR, Abbott said he had heard there were clerical errors made by Legislative Counsel with regard to SB 7, but was not familiar with the error that Representative Clardy talked about. I wouldn't be surprised if it was an error, Abbott said. That said, I don't want to hinder anybody's ability to vote on that one Sunday that we do have for early voting, and so I'm amenable to making modifications to ensure that people do have adequate to be able to vote. I think that they either meant to put the word time in there, or he meant to say it and didn't. I don't know whether they quoted him accurately, but adequate time to be able to vote. All right, so I guess keep an eye on that one, and when they have their special session, we'll see whether or not that issue, in fact, gets corrected. But yeah, now I can see, all right, so the current law was that counties of 100,000 or more were required to make 5 hours at least available on that Sunday. And I don't know whether they had a window during which that 5 hours had to take place that was defined. But now counties with 30,000 or more would have to have at least 6 hours. So that would be considered an expansion. But maybe the old window was 11 to 9, and then it got narrowed to 1 to 9. And 1 to 9 is what? 8 hours. And if you have to be open for 6 out of those 8. So I guess it's one of those things, depending on, what angle you look at it from. It's either an expansion or a contraction. There's plenty of moving parts in this one. Just interesting to see all the detail of it and see how that will work out. All right, let's squeeze in another quick hit before moving to our final break. Just an interesting little piece. It's come up before and now it's coming up again, just to show you, I guess, where the Trump organization is with all of their business ventures. The Trump organization is putting the D.C. hotel lease up for sale again, according to a report, which I guess would indicate that maybe Donald Trump doesn't really believe he's coming back to D.C. in August after all, if they're going to sell off the hotel. Where's he going to eat after all? The Trump organization is making another attempt to sell the lease to its D.C. hotel after failing to close a deal on the property during the pandemic, the Washington Post reported Tuesday. I'm reading from The Hill. The Pennsylvania Avenue Hotel became a popular destination for lobbyists and foreign government officials during former President Trump's tenure, but Trump's election loss and the COVID-19 pandemic have caused its profits to plummet. I mean, it's really his election loss. There's no way to bribe him anymore using the hotel. The Trump organization, or there's a way to bribe him, it's just he doesn't have the ability to deliver anything back, which is perfect for him. The Trump organization is hiring a brokerage firm, Newmark Group, to sell the property, two sources told the Post. Because why? I don't know. I thought the Trump organization existed on this planet for the purpose of being able to make great deals, but now they think the Newmark Group will make a better deal, or at least any deal. They don't want to do any of the work. Beware, by the way, Newmark Group, that you get paid. Not certain that you will. Trump's company tried to sell the lease in the fall of 2019, but was forced to pull the listing when the pandemic hit. Trump leases the government-owned hotel, of course, from the General Services Administration. Democrats and people who believe in the rule of law criticize the agency for failing to track the income Trump may have received from foreign governments staying at the hotel. We criticize the fact that the lease was allowed to go forward at all. And, of course, you'll remember why everyone was concerned. Things like, shortly after the 2016 election, lobbyists representing Saudi Arabia booked roughly 500 rooms at the hotel over the course of 3 months. Left-leaning watchdog group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington reported that more than 130 foreign government officials visited the D.C. hotel during Trump's presidency, the most among all Trump properties. The Trump organization had insisted it did not want foreign clients or did not welcome foreign clients and reported donating foreign profits to the Treasury Department. But yes, GSA wouldn't tell us anything about what sort of accounting was made for those profits and how much they were and where they came from and where they went. But anyway, now they were ready to unload this thing. That reminds me, I don't know whether we'll get to this now, today, some other time. Maybe it's a Friday sort of thing. But yeah, because we got a mention of Saudi Arabia when we were thinking the other day of the story with Jared Kushner and his dealings with Mohammed bin Salman and their dealings in turn with Jordan. Did some more reading over the weekend. Still a fascinating region. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. It makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. My goodness. I'm just sort of checking up on the various things flying by on Twitter. But on the way out, I mentioned, I think I can actually maybe long story short this. But you could make it a very long story too. But on the way out, I mentioned that recalling the story we read last week of Jared Kushner's plotting during his time in the Trump administration with Mohammed bin Salman to reshape the Middle East, and how that article sort of finally made sense of the phrasing of reshaping the Middle East. I thought that was just, a verbal flourish to make it sound like they were accomplishing something, but that there was some real substance to a reshaping that, finally helped make sense of some of their scheming. But that essentially the reshaping was to force it seemed like it was aimed at forcing a broader acknowledgement in, I guess what you would call, in real world terms, of Saudi or Saudish, as we'd like to say, hegemony in the region. And that was a long-term geopolitical goal for the Saudis, obviously, the Sauds, anyway, the family that owns the place. And they found an ally in Jared Kushner for a number of reasons. One among them being the shared ideology, the shared Gimitarian ideology between Mohammed bin Salman and Jared Kushner, the transactional nature of everything and the willingness to commingle business interests and political interests and scratch one another's back and make money for one another, if at all possible. But the planning was, there was also a somewhat legitimate geopolitical element to it, and I say legitimate because I don't really know whether it's really legitimate, but it's a both sides thing. Both Democrats and Republicans in the Washington consensus probably would agree that, they seem to agree to the goal of boosting Saud claims to regional hegemony, the idea being, as opposed to, say, the rising threat, whether it was real or exaggerated or not, of Iranian hegemony in the region. And it became, there's all sorts of levels in which you could deal with it. One, the we hate Iran, but sell lots of weapons to the Saudis, and so therefore love them level. Although, we've sold weapons to the Iranians in the past too, and we were quiet about it, and we didn't love them when we did it, but it was necessary for Republican politics, and so therefore okay, in the way Republicans think of it, in the gimmitarian scheme of things. But yeah, there's some real issues about this, and the Iranians attempting to extend their influence and doing so really through Shia Muslim populations in some of these countries, including Saudi Arabia, where there's an oppressed Shia minority because the majority and the people who own the place are Sunni Muslims, and there were there's existing tensions there and playing upon those. And I don't know whether, does a Saudi-ish Shia Muslim really feel any particular identity with Iran beyond the fact that Iran might be ostensibly championing their cause in fighting against whatever oppression they might be encountering in day-to-day life in Saudi Arabia? Or is there something more to it? I don't know. You would have to ask them. But that's the lines upon which a lot of these tensions, across which a lot of these tensions take place. And this happens in Lebanon. It happens in Gaza, in the West Bank, and all over Palestine. It happens everywhere. It happens in Iraq, everywhere. And anyway, there's an ongoing international confrontation, not only just for regional hegemony, but for, I guess, influence everywhere. The Saud royal family has always been very active, for instance, in promoting in promoting Islam in general around the world, being very careful to ingratiate themselves to local non-Middle Eastern Muslim populations around the world by paying for the construction of mosques and schools attached to those mosques. And of course, the very scary name that Fox News likes to remind you is always attached to these schools, madrasas, even though they're just schools. But at any rate, in funding these things around the world, there seems to be two, parallel agendas in that. And one, it would be, if we are the ones paying for the schools, then we're the ones that get to decide which brand, essentially, of Islam you are introduced to, Sunni or Shia. And since we're Sunni, it's going to be Sunni. And that helps them keep, the Shia population internationally in a minority status. But, there's also actual geopolitical interests behind it, besides the religious interests, of course. And getting these larger, growing non-Middle Eastern Muslim countries to align ideologically, politically, with Saudi Arabia. And I guess they would then perhaps support the Saud family's bid for what was focused on in this article about Jordan, which would be removing the Jordanian royalty. Remember the Hashemite dynasty ruling in Jordan, removing them as custodians of the Jerusalem holy sites. The name of the region, I guess, again, escapes me, but it includes, of course, the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. But these holy sites under the custodianship of the King of Jordan. And I guess in discussing it last week when we were reading the article, I was thinking, well, I guess they're the closest in proximity. And of course, the whole area used to be, of Palestine, etc., used to be sort of Transjordan and under their control. And so in the establishment of Palestine as a British protectorate and later the establishment of Israel, it seemed like the thing to do to leave it in their hands. Whereas the Saud royal family were the guardians of and custodians of Mecca and Medina, the holy sites there. And, well, of course it would make sense that they would be the custodians because they're in their country. But that's just recently. We've talked, all of our discussions of Saud-ish Arabia, every time we refer to them that way, is about their relative modernity as a country and the strange construct of absolute monarchy that continues in the modern world, and how you really have to realize when you're dealing with any of the absolute monarchies, the land, the entire country, I guess, belongs to the Saud family. Everybody else gets to live in it and pretend it's a country by their good graces, but that their domination of the territory is relatively recent and was won by force of arms, as, most, I guess, eventually, if you go back far enough, some you don't have to go very far back at all. Every country has that part of its history. That's how you establish it. And then afterwards, when you normalize things and develop an economy and proceed apace, people either tend to forget this or just figure that's just the way it is. And now, thankfully, we're in a more peaceful era, and you forget that that's how you established your hegemony in your area in the first place. So it's not really all that unusual, and it's not like we're without that same history, but it's just unusual to see so close in history. And, if Saudi Arabia has been around all of my living or otherwise lifetime, the whole thing. And so, it seems like ancient history that they were, how they were established. And I don't think very much about it, except it's really not all that ancient. Anyway, the point was not so much that as how is it that they became the ruling family of the Arabian Peninsula, and two, the guardians of Mecca and Medina. And the answer isn't simply, well, they conquered all of Saudi Arabia, and so therefore, of course they're the guardians, just as the people, the kings closest to the holy sites in Jerusalem get to be the custodians of that. It used to be the case up through the mid-1920s that the Hashemite kings of Jordan were also literally the possessors and kings of Mecca and Medina. There's a whole, apparently, I had to look it up, I read about it, there's a whole swath of what is now Western Saudi Arabia, including Mecca and Medina, that was, under the rulership of the Hashemite kings of Jordan, back in Lawrence of Arabia days, basically, when it was just a one rolling desert battle there, and it was anybody's guess which family would end up dominating and becoming and declaring themselves kings of those areas. And the Al Saud family was at war with the Al Rashid family. We've mentioned in the past that we were that close to it being Rashidi Arabia instead of Saudi Arabia, but they fought one another for control of the eastern sections of Saudish Arabia, and having consolidated power there, the Al Saud family then swept westward and essentially took over Mecca and Medina in the 20s and established themselves as kings of Saudi Arabia and custodians of Mecca and Medina. And since then, have probably been wondering, and now that they are oil rich and underwriting the spread and maintenance of Islam around the world through their, construction of mosques and schools all over the world, Middle East and otherwise, wherever there's a significant Muslim population. And they might be thinking, well, and in addition, that article mentioned that much of the operations of the government of Jordan are underwritten again by Saudi money, oil money to be sure, but Saudi money. And so they must be thinking, transactional people as they are, that was the attraction between MBS and Kushner, they must be thinking, well, what am I getting for my investment? If I'm propping up the collapsing Hashemite dynasty of Jordan, and in propping them up, they remain, for whatever reason, custodians of these important holy sites in Jerusalem. Why should they be the custodians of those? I'm the custodian of Mecca and Medina. why am I not also the custodian of the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque if I'm paying to prop up the kings that say they're the custodians? Make me the custodian. Well, there's some delicate geopolitics to be negotiated and all of that. And I guess Mohammed bin Salman saw the possibility in Kushner that somebody could influence the United States to the extent that they could then lean on Israel and possibly on the Palestinians and on their close allies in Jordan to say, look, what does it really matter? You're custodian. What does it mean for you to be custodian of these lands? It's a nice honorary title, but you don't really do anything. And you're not even paying for it anyway. The Saudis are the ones paying for it. Why don't we just let them be the custodians and unify these holy sites and the Saudi desert holy cities and unify the custodianship under the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia? Not that I believe that the kings of Jordan would be willing to go along with it or anything. That's where Kushner comes in. You can convince the United States president to make this official policy and start pushing for this, and then I get this big point of pride, or maybe more, and to further lure you in. And this is all speculative here for me, but my guess is that he probably also said to Jared Kushner, look also at my willingness to back the push for normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Arabian Peninsula states. And remember that otherwise seemingly on its face useless offer of formalizing peace agreements as between United Arab Emirates and maybe some of the others, Bahrain, Qatar, I'm not sure who else was in on it, signing peace deals with Israel, even though they really were never really in any active war footing with Israel, but okay. There was a technical hostility, and maybe we could settle those things and we could do joint economic development projects, and that's always a good thing, et cetera, et cetera. But it seems to me that MBS was probably offering Kushner peace in the Middle East through making Saudi Arabia custodian of what ends up being the focal point of most of the Arab-Israeli tension in Israel and Palestine. These holy sites, certainly the focus of the current uprisings at the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. So they might be saying, if you gave us custodianship of it, you would have a better partner, a better, closer partner to work with than the Jordanians, who are, I'm sure in their view, a puppet regime anyway, even though they're pro-U.S. Well, hey, they'll say, so are we. And besides which, we're paying for the whole thing anyway. And you and I have this special relationship, and there'll be so much more peace if the Arab Muslim authorities speaking for the administration of this of the holy sites in Jerusalem was me, your good buddy MBS. Now, long term, I couldn't tell you. I have no basis to tell you whether there would be less tension and confrontation surrounding the holy sites in Jerusalem if the Saudi kings were custodians of the area versus the Jordanians. I haven't seen the Jordanians really taking a strong hand in anything. I'm sure MBS thinks that, my hand would be much stronger and then I'd be able to control it that much better. But it's a difficult thing to predict. Let's say once he gets what he wants, does MBS have any particular reason, particularly when Kushner is no longer in government, whether that happened now or perhaps if Trump had won another term? Eventually he's going to be out of government. Does MBS deliver on the promise of better or smoother relations, or at least better or smoother administration of that area, in terms of, the way Israelis and Americans would view it as being better? Do the Palestinians accept any of this? Do they ever accept it being under the custodianship of the King of Jordan, for that matter? I don't know. And I don't know whether they'd be any more or less upset or more or less willing to work with authorities if the Saudis administered it either. But clearly he believes that at least Jared Kushner would be happier if the Saudis were in charge there and had a more direct hand and would be called upon to take a seat at the table in any ongoing negotiations between Israel and Palestine. But I don't know that they're a positive influence yet. I guess we're supposed to believe that. The new Middle East. And he's very transactional, and we would be able to understand that if he wasn't on board with what we wanted for so-called peace in that region, we could bribe him into it. There's always that. At least we would be able to understand that much. But, I don't know. I can't tell you whether it's a good idea. I don't know whether it's worth the headache for Saudi Arabia to insert themselves in this either. They're able to concentrate on making money and being transactional if they're not responsible for this, and it's they get to push it off on the Hashemites in Amman instead. Anyway, I just thought pretty fascinating history, I don't know. I guess the downward trajectory of the Hashemite dynasty has been pretty interesting too over the long term. They used to be the custodians of all of the top holy sites of Islam and may very shortly end up in charge of none of them. Not that it ever made a difference. All right, 10 minutes left. Time to move on to a couple other things. One of which is Greg having sent on via Twitter here with the KITM hashtag the reporting of Christina Wilkie, who has this brand new piece linked to a CNBC article. A Kevin, who's the scoop from Kevin Bruniger, who reports that the Trump blog page has shut down for good. And I emphasize that it is for good. It's for the good of America and the good of the world that the blog page is shut down, but I guess permanently. Remember that just weeks ago, and 2 weeks, very shortly, you'll be finding out that my blog page sucks and I'm turning it off forever. Remember, he was trying to build himself a platform to get around his social media bans and figured out that the blog somehow was going to do it. And instead, we got 2 weeks or whatever it is full of stories about how his reach is never going to rebound and how much nicer it is not to have to listen to Donald Trump every 5 minutes. And then he got bored and he's shutting it down. So what's the story? Let's read it through. There's some bullet points up there, but it's not a terribly long story, so we'll just zoom through that instead. Former President Donald Trump's blog, a web page where he shared statements after larger social media companies banned him from their platforms, has been permanently shut down, his spokesman said Wednesday. The page from the desk of Donald J. Trump has been scrubbed from Trump's website after going live less than a month earlier. It, quote, will not be returning, his senior aide, Jason Miller, told CNBC. And remember, he just lost a big court case, Jason did. It was just auxiliary to the broader efforts we have and are working on, Miller said in his email correspondence. He declined to provide additional details about those efforts, hoping to have some more information on the broader efforts soon, but I do not have a precise awareness of timing, Miller said. And that's just because Trump is just doing what he does and bumbling through his day, and he doesn't really care about one project or another. And eventually he'll find that he has nothing to keep Jason Miller busy with, and we'll get rid of him too. Facebook and Twitter both banned Trump from posting on their platforms after January 6th. I wonder why. Of course, that was the date when a mob of the then president's supporters violently invaded the U.S. Capitol, forcing a joint session of Congress into hiding. Trump, who never conceded to President Joe Biden, repeatedly and falsely claimed on social media after the November 3rd election that the race had been stolen from him by widespread fraud. Trump and his allies have long accused social media giants of being tainted by political bias and prone to censoring conservatives. The former president has teased the rollout of an alternative platform, and maybe that's still happening. But the blog, unveiled last month and originally billed as a new, quote, communications platform, seemed ill-equipped to take on the largest social media companies. Miller clarified at the time, on Twitter, ironically, that the desk page was a great resource to find Trump's statements, but this is not a new social media platform. At the time of his deplatforming in January, Trump boasted tens of millions of followers on Twitter and millions more on Facebook, Trump's blog, in contrast, struggled to amass even a fraction of that engagement. NBC News reported a week after its launch, citing data compiled with BuzzSumo. That'll tell you how serious an outfit it was. BuzzSumo. Since leaving office on January 20th, the former president, who has strongly hinted he may run again for president in 2024, has made just a handful of in-person appearances and has participated in interviews with only friendly media outlets. And yeah, there were a couple of stories that we never did get around to reading. Some of them are in pocket. I don't know how easy it'll be to discover any of them before running into something else even more relevant. But suffice to say that, yes, whether they were fueled by BuzzSumo or other sources, plenty of write-ups of the fact that, yeah, nobody's reading Trump's blog, and his impact in the media is significantly diminished as a result. And later on, after the show, I will find all of that stuff and provide it to you for, I don't know, by way of proof of all of these claims. But good. I'm glad that's happening. He sucks and he has no attention span. And I hope that means that he's never close to being in power again. But speaking about the last time that he ended up in power, maybe we have time to add this news from the Wall Street Journal, which yesterday, anyway, temporarily allowed me to read their story, but I guess now has gotten around to blocking the whole thing. I thought about grabbing all of the text and putting it in an email to myself, but look, the long story short is probably a better description of what's going on here. Anyway, headline from the Wall Street Journal: National Enquirer parent, the parent company, and ex-CEO fined for breaking election law in 2016 campaign. The FEC cites the hush payment to ex-Playboy model Karen McDougal, who said she had an affair with Donald Trump. That's at the center of all of this. The publisher of the National Enquirer agreed to pay $187,500. It's not very much. As part of a settlement with the Federal Election Commission over a 2016 scheme, you'll remember, to buy and then suppress the story of a woman who alleged an affair with former President Donald Trump. I'm sure Trump now considers that a huge waste of money because everybody found out about the affair and it didn't affect him in any way, so what the hell, why did I pay that money? Anyway, as it turns out, the May 17th agreement between A360 Media LLC and the FEC characterized the $150,000 payment to Karen McDougal as an illegal corporate campaign contribution. Federal law prohibits companies from making contributions directly out of corporate money. They can use PACs, of course. You can't make a contribution to candidates or candidate committees. A spokesman for A360 Media and David Pecker, the former chief executive of American Media Incorporated, that used to be the parent company of National Enquirer, didn't have any immediate comment. But the interesting part here, by the way, American Media got bought up by another group and then got merged into this A360 Media LLC. As it turns out, interestingly, I guess the company that bought them is apparently a logistics company in Georgia. I was just sort of curious about that acquisition and why did they do it and what synergies did they see in merging with the media company that distributed the National Enquirer. And I don't know what kind of logistics they do, but like trucking and stuff, or maybe they figured they could buy it and it was a profitable thing and they could deliver it for less because they were a logistics company and they could improve the margins, the profit margins on. I got no idea why they made this. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And they are all of $187,500 lighter in the pocket as a result of this illegal activity. I guess the real upshot of this is the FEC agreed to do this, but then deadlocked over the question of whether or not they would reach a finding by vote that Trump and the Trump campaign had actually violated campaign laws. They were fining people for breaking the campaign laws, but they were fining American media for doing it. As to whether or not they would find Trump guilty of breaking campaign finance law, that was too symbolic for them. That was too much of an admission of wrongdoing by Trump. So the Republicans on the commission blocked it, and they have taken no action. And essentially, though Pecker and the National Enquirer get in trouble, Trump formally does not, and of course Trump has claimed that as vindication, and it was all phony charges against me, but all these substantive elements that stood against him stood against National Enquirer. National Enquirer got punished because their name isn't Trump, and the guy whose name is Trump gets to skate. So, there you go. We should now be optimistic about everything instead of pessimistic like all those pundits out there. Plenty more where that came from, of course. We'll get to that and more tomorrow when we're rejoined by Greg, and Friday when we fly solo, or we try to fill in some of those gaps maybe with someone else's help. Lots of news stories to get to, and I'm sure there'll be more time that we have to spend outlining what are the outrages of the day from the Republicans, and who knows, maybe some of that will come to your attention on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next, as Justice Putnam takes over the mic to tell you about what's in his collection of stories for the day. What do we got here so far? Because the quantum of evidence is so great, Trump's latest extra-legal strategy won't stop the indictments. Oh, that sounds like good news. Let's find out more about that next. Plus, immigrant advocates are pushing the Biden administration to bring back people deported under Trump. Lots of official announcements in the last couple of days of the Biden administration formally ending the most egregious portions of what passed for an immigration policy under the Trump administration. So that and much more on the subject next. Stay tuned.
Networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
There's a state-sanctioned report that found that the Virginia Military Institute has tolerated institutional racism and sexism and must be held accountable for making changes. That much overdue. Good news on that front. And then across the seas, where news comes in of the German foreign minister. We'll leave that a mystery for him to solve next.